The glass walls of Northwell Tower, Chicago's most imposing skyscraper, shimmered in the morning light as Victoria Hale, 52, CEO of HaleGen Biotech, barked into her phone. "Tell the investors the trial data is solid. I don't care what legal says. Just release the statement." Her platinum blonde hair was perfect, her tone razor-sharp, her nerves fraying. She'd been awake for 36 hours straight preparing a billion-dollar merger announcement. Everyone in her orbit feared her, except the man polishing the floor outside her office door. He knocked once before stepping in. "Ms. Hale," he said quietly, "your blood pressure's dangerously high. You're pale and your left hand's shaking. You need to go to the hospital now." Victoria froze mid-sentence. The voice belonged to Aaron Bishop, 45, the night maintenance supervisor. A tall black man in a faded uniform carrying a mop bucket. The audacity of the interruption made her forget her call. "Excuse me?" she said, incredulous. "Did you just give me medical advice?" Aaron met her glare without flinching. "Yes, ma'am. You're showing neurological symptoms, hand tremor, slurred speech, delayed focus. I've seen it before." Victoria laughed short and sharp. "And your background again? Advanced sanitation?" The sarcasm sliced through the quiet office. Aaron lowered his gaze, but his tone stayed even. "Used to be an ICU nurse before. Well, life happened." "Well, life can keep happening somewhere else," she snapped. "Get back to your chemicals and let me run my company in peace. And next time, clean in silence." He nodded once. "Understood." Outside, in the corridor scented with lemon polish and power, Aaron leaned on his mop handle, heart pounding. He'd seen enough to know something was seriously wrong with her. But experience had taught him that people like Victoria Hale didn't listen to men like him, especially men whose skin color reminded them of the world they preferred not to see. 5 years earlier, Aaron had been nurse supervisor at St. Elmo Medical Center, celebrated for his calm under pressure and flawless patient care record. Then came the night that destroyed everything. It started with a white surgeon, Dr. Gregory Fenwick, performing an unauthorized experimental procedure on a black patient without proper consent. Aaron reported him. Within a month, an anonymous complaint accused Aaron of falsifying charts. The hospital suspended him, pending investigation. No charges, no proof, just whispers. By the time his name was cleared, the board had quietly revoked his license for administrative discrepancies. No hospital would touch him, so he mopped floors at HaleGen Biotech, a company that, ironically, manufactured the very cardiac drugs he'd once administered to patients. Still, the nurse inside him never stopped observing. And what he'd seen in Victoria's office that morning terrified him. 2 days later, during a board meeting on the 60th floor, Aaron was buffing the hallway marble when he heard raised voices through the half-open door. "Victoria, you're repeating yourself," said Alan Mercer, CFO. "You mentioned that slide 3 times." "I did not," Victoria barked. "Maybe you can't keep up." Aaron risked a glance through the glass. Victoria's normally steady hands fumbled with her tablet. Her pupils were uneven. She blinked too often, as if fighting dizziness. Classic signs. He'd seen them in stroke units countless times. When the meeting adjourned, he entered silently to clear glasses. "Ms. Hale," he said softly, "you dropped the stylus earlier." She stared at him blankly for 3 long seconds before recognition flickered. "Oh, yes. Thank you. What's your name again?"
"Aaron, ma'am."
She nodded, already turning away, but the tremor in her left hand deepened. He couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, back in his small Southside apartment, Aaron opened an old medical notebook. Its pages were filled with precise handwriting. Symptom logs, vital sign estimates, behavioral notes. He began a new entry. Patient, Victoria Hale. Possible differential, intracranial aneurysm or tumor. Evidence, tremor, anisocoria, cognitive lapses. Prognosis without intervention. Critical. He closed the book slowly. He'd promised himself never to get involved again, never to risk another ruin. But some instincts were stronger than fear. 3 days later, while replacing air filters in the executive suite, Aaron met Dr. Helena Torres, a retired neurologist consulting part-time for HaleGen's insurance division. She'd once taught residents at the very hospital that had betrayed him. "You handle those filters like you're starting in 4, she said with a knowing smile. "Old habits," Aaron replied. They talked. Within minutes, Helena saw through the uniform. "You were clinical," she said, not asking but stating. "ICU nurse," he admitted. 15 years. When he described Victoria's symptoms, Helena's expression hardened. "That's not stress," she murmured. "Could be a slow bleed or a tumor pressing on the motor cortex. If you're right, she's sitting on a time bomb." Aaron nodded grimly. "She won't listen to me. Then find someone she will." That evening, Aaron drafted an anonymous message addressed to Evelyn Hale, Victoria's husband, a prominent art dealer known for his patience and kindness, the opposite of his wife's volatility. "Your wife is exhibiting progressive neurological symptoms requiring immediate evaluation. Please ensure she receives a full MRI and CT scan." The attached document lists observed incidents. He printed the letter and signed and mailed it the next morning. What he didn't know was that Evelyn hadn't lived at their home for months. The letter was intercepted by Samantha Voss, Victoria's personal assistant, who brought it straight to her boss. Victoria read the note, lips curling. Anonymous threats now? Probably some disgruntled employee. She tore it in half and tossed it into the shred bin. But fate was already moving. The next week, HaleGen's board prepared to announce the merger with Genix Corp, a deal worth nearly $3 billion. Cameras, journalists, investors, all waiting for Victoria's speech. She rehearsed late into the night, ignoring the throbbing behind her eyes. Aaron noticed the slump in her posture as she passed through the lobby, makeup flawless but gait uneven. He took a step forward. "Ma'am, you really should." She cut him off. "If you mention hospitals again, you'll be out of a job. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. But his decision was already made. That night he met Dr. Torres at a diner near Lake Michigan. "She's getting worse," he told her. Slurring, confusion. Today she called her CFO by the wrong name twice. Helena drummed her fingers on the table. "We can't force treatment unless she's incapacitated. But if we can get proof, video, documentation, her family or the board could intervene legally." Aaron hesitated. "Record her. Document her symptoms professionally. You know how to do that." He did, and he would. For the next 10 days, Aaron documented everything. Timestamps, recordings of public meetings, notes of every misstep. The more he saw, the clearer it became. Victoria Hale was dying in slow motion, and no one dared tell her. Rain lashed the glass facade of Northwell Tower, blurring the city lights into ribbons of gold. Inside, the headquarters of HaleGen Biotech hummed with sleepless urgency. The merger announcement was 2 weeks away, and every department was collapsing under Victoria Hale's perfectionism. Aaron Bishop moved through the hallways like a ghost. Quiet, invisible, indispensable. His mop bucket and worn gloves were a disguise that let him see everything without being seen. That night, he saw Victoria stumble out of the executive elevator, one hand pressed to her temple. "Ms. Hale, you all right?" he asked before he could stop himself. She looked up sharply. "Do I look all right?" Her pupils glimmered unevenly beneath the LED lights. "It's a migraine. I don't need commentary from maintenance." "Then maybe some water," he said. He handed her a bottle from his cart. She took it without thanks, gulped twice, and disappeared down the hall. A minute later, she dropped the bottle. Water spread across the marble like a slow-moving mirror. Aaron crouched, wiping it up, and saw faint crimson where she'd pressed her hand. Blood from her nose. He pocketed the tissue she used, sealing it in a small bag. Proof if anyone ever asked. Dr. Helena Torres called him the next morning. "You were right," she said. "I compared her public photos, her left eyelids drooping, and her smiles asymmetrical. That's cranial nerve involvement. She's not just tired." Aaron exhaled. "If we go to the board, they'll bury it unless it threatens the merger," Helena replied. "But there's another way. Her husband's art gallery is hosting a charity event Friday. She'll be there. I'll come too. If we can get her to collapse publicly." "Doctor, I don't mean harm. I mean evidence. If she loses balance or speech in front of cameras, no one can deny it." Aaron didn't like the plan, but time was running out. That evening, while scrubbing the staff cafeteria floor, Aaron heard two junior executives whispering near the coffee machine. Internal audit found discrepancies in the clinical trial data. Halegen's new drug, Vicortin, might cause cerebral swelling. They're sitting on the results till after the merger. His chest tightened. Cerebral swelling. The same symptom he suspected in Victoria. Could she be a victim of her own product? He finished mopping, then slipped into the archive room, where discarded boxes of reports waited for shredding. A folder marked VC Phase 3 caught his eye. Inside, test results, MRI images, and a confidential memo signed by Alan Mercer, the CFO. Preliminary findings indicate elevated risk of aneurysm in female patients over 50. Suppress data until further analysis. Aaron felt cold all over. Victoria Hale was dying from the very drug her company was promoting. The charity gala glittered beneath crystal chandeliers in the Chicago Museum of Art. Photographers flashed. Champagne glasses clinked. A jazz quartet murmured in the corner. Aaron stood near the back wall in a catering jacket borrowed from Helena's friend. He watched Victoria glide through the crowd in an ivory gown, flawless on the outside but faltering within. Every few steps her left hand twitched. Helena arrived moments later, disguised as a guest, phone camera ready. "Remember," she whispered, "we don't provoke her, just observe." An hour passed. Speeches, laughter, donors. Then it happened. Victoria was midway through thanking her investors when her words slurred into silence. The microphone slipped from her hand. She swayed, blinking in confusion. Gasps rippled through the room. Aaron was already moving. He caught her as she fell, easing her onto the floor. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" he said, checking her pupils. One was blown wide. "Someone call an ambulance," Helena shouted. A man pushed through the crowd. Evelyn Hale, estranged but still protective. "What happened to her?" Aaron didn't answer. He was already positioning her head, clearing her airway. "She's having a neurological event," he said. "Possible aneurysm rupture." Within minutes, paramedics arrived. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, Aaron's borrowed jacket slipped open, revealing his old hospital ID still clipped to the inside pocket. One medic looked at it, then at him. "You coming with us?" Aaron hesitated, then nodded. "She'll need someone who knows the history." At Chicago General, the ER lights burned sterile and bright. Doctors swarmed Victoria. CT scan confirmed it. Ruptured aneurysm, emergency surgery required. Evelyn paced outside the glass doors, white-knuckled. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Used to be her company's janitor," Aaron said. "Before that, a nurse." Evelyn stared. "You saved her." Aaron shook his head. "Not yet." Hours crawled by. Finally, a surgeon emerged, mask pulled down. "She's stable. We clipped the aneurysm before full rupture. She'll need monitoring. But she's alive thanks to whoever recognized the signs early." Evelyn turned to Aaron. "That was you." Aaron looked at the floor. "Just did what anyone would." But not everyone would, and they both knew it. News exploded by morning. CEO collapses at charity gala. Saved by company janitor. The headline went viral. Social media devoured it, half admiration, half scandal. HaleGen's stock plummeted 14% before noon. Inside the hospital suite, Victoria awoke to whispers outside her door. Her assistant, Samantha Voss, entered nervously. "There's press everywhere, Ms. Hale. They're calling Mr. Bishop a hero." "Mr. who?" "The maintenance supervisor." Victoria blinked, memory foggy. "The one who warned me?" "Yes." Her eyes flickered with humiliation and confusion. "Get him out of my company." Samantha hesitated. "He saved your life." "I don't care. I'm not turning my recovery into a charity story." But Samantha didn't move to make the call. That afternoon, Alan Mercer visited the hospital. His smile was polished, his briefcase heavier than usual. "Victoria, thank God you're awake," he said smoothly. "The board's concerned. We need to finalize the Genix deal." She frowned. "I can barely stand. Can't it wait?" "It can't," he said, lowering his voice. "If this drags out, the auditors might dig into the VCorton data. You know what that means." She stared at him. "What are you implying?" Alan's smile thinned. "That some things are better left undiscovered, for both of us." Outside in the corridor, Aaron overheard every word. His jaw tightened. The pieces fit. The cover-up, her illness, the merger. She wasn't just a victim. She was complicit. Helena texted him minutes later. "I pulled more files. You were right. VCorton causes microaneurysms. HaleGen hid it. I have proof." He typed back. "Then we expose it." 2 nights later, while security changed shifts, Aaron slipped into HaleGen's data center using the access card of a sympathetic guard. He copied the hidden clinical results onto a flash drive. Suddenly, a flashlight beam hit him. "Mr. Bishop?" It was Samantha Voss. "I knew it was you," she whispered. "I saw the reports too. They destroyed people's lives to protect that drug." "Then help me," Aaron said. "We take this to the FDA." She nodded. But as they exited the server room, an alarm blared. Alan Mercer appeared at the end of the hall, flanked by security. "Going somewhere?" he said coolly. "Hand over the drive." Aaron pocketed it. "You'd rather let people die?" Alan sighed. "I'd rather keep the company alive." "Same thing." He gestured. The guards moved in. Samantha whispered, "Run." Aaron sprinted down the stairwell, footsteps echoing. The flash drive in his pocket felt heavier than gold. Rain hammered the parking deck as he burst through the door. Helena's car idled nearby. She waved him in. "Did you get it?" He handed her the drive. "Everything. Enough to bring them down." Headlights flared behind them, security SUVs. Tires screeched. Helena slammed the accelerator. The sedan fishtailed onto Lower Wabash. "Where now?" she asked. Aaron glanced back at the approaching lights. "Somewhere public. Somewhere they can't silence us." He didn't yet know that the woman he'd saved, the one who had dismissed him, insulted him, nearly fired him, was awake in her hospital bed, replaying fragments of his voice in her head. beginning to remember the warning she'd ignored. And somewhere deep in her recovering brain, a question formed that would change everything. Why would a janitor know the signs of an aneurysm before my own doctors? Daniel Morgan woke before dawn, the gray light of a Chicago winter creeping through the narrow blinds of his apartment. His alarm had gone off an hour ago, but he had been lying there, awake, replaying the events of the previous day. Eleanor's voice, cold and dismissive, "You're a janitor, not a doctor," echoed through his mind like static. He sat up, rubbing his face. The irony was relentless. He had spent years saving lives in high-stress emergency rooms, only to end up cleaning the floors of one of the most profitable medical corporations in the country. The company that Eleanor Hale ran like a fiefdom. He made coffee, the cheap instant kind that left a bitter taste no matter how much sugar he added. As he sipped it, he opened his laptop. The document he had started weeks ago sat open on the screen, a running log of Eleanor's symptoms. Date, time, observed episode, physical signs, cognitive impairment. His handwriting in the margins of scanned notes looked steady, clinical. His last remnant of the professional precision he'd once lived by. At the top of the file he added a new line. January 12th, 7:42 a.m. Woke to text from night staff. Eleanor Hale reported dizziness leaving the building. Witnessed leaning on the elevator wall for balance. He exhaled slowly. It's getting worse. By 9 o'clock he was at the Hale Biotech Tower, dressed in his uniform. Gray overalls, the company logo stitched over the heart. A name tag that simply read Daniel. The marble lobby gleamed like an advertisement for power. Security guards nodded to him. Most people didn't look up. He rode the service lift to the top floor. The doors slid open to the private offices where silence was currency. Eleanor was already inside, pacing as she argued on the phone. "I said I want that report today, Graham. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel ready, today." Her voice cracked mid-sentence. A small break she quickly masked with a cough. Daniel watched from the doorway, unseen, as she pressed a hand to her temple. He crossed the room quietly, pretending to dust the shelves. The faint tremor in her left hand was back. She noticed him finally. "Do you mind?" she snapped, lowering the phone. "You can do that later." "Yes, ma'am," he murmured. As he turned to leave, she stumbled, just slightly, but enough for him to reach out instinctively. She jerked away. "I said I'm fine." Daniel's hand hovered in the air. "You should sit down. I don't need advice from a cleaner." He nodded, backing away. Of course. But his mind was already racing. The episodes were now daily, the tremor worsening. He'd seen enough to know she was on the verge of a neurological collapse. Stroke, aneurysm, or an aggressive tumor pressing against motor centers. If she didn't get treatment soon, she might not survive the month. That night he sat with Dr. Janet Bennett, a retired neurologist he'd met through a volunteer clinic on the South Side. She'd become his quiet mentor after hearing his story, the false allegations, the board hearing that shredded his reputation. "She's deteriorating fast," Daniel said. "I can't reach her. She won't listen to anyone she doesn't consider her equal." Janet sipped her tea, eyes sharp behind reading glasses. People like Eleanor Hale live inside bubbles reinforced by fear. They only listen when the bubble bursts. She won't make it that far. Then we burst it for her. Daniel frowned. "How?" "Through the one person she still trusts," Janet said. "Her husband." Daniel hesitated.
Robert Hale?
"The investment banker." Janet nodded. "If what you're describing is accurate, he's already seen signs. He just needs evidence strong enough to override her denial." Daniel glanced down at his notebook. "I have plenty. Then we'll make sure it finds the right eyes." 2 days later, Eleanor's condition hit its first visible crisis. During a board meeting streamed to investors, she froze mid-presentation. The words on the teleprompter blurred. Numbers danced across the screen. Her mouth opened, but nothing coherent came out. Cameras kept rolling. The audience thought it was a technical glitch, until she reached for the podium and missed it entirely, her fingers clenching air. "Are you all right, Ms. Hale?" one director asked. I just need water," she stammered. Her assistant rushed forward. Daniel, watching from the corridor, caught the brief sag of her left shoulder, the droop of her mouth, a mini-stroke. After the meeting, Eleanor locked herself in her office. For an hour, no one entered. When Daniel finally went in to clean, she was sitting motionless behind her desk, staring at nothing. "You can leave the trash," she said quietly without looking up. Daniel paused. "You should see a doctor, Ms. Hale." She gave a hollow laugh. "Do you always harass your employers?" "No, ma'am. Only when they're dying in front of me." Her head snapped up, eyes blazing. "What did you say?" "You heard me." The silence between them crackled. He could feel her pride rising like a wall. "Get out," she whispered. Daniel placed a small envelope on the desk. "Inside you'll find documentation of your symptoms, time-stamped, detailed, clinical. Show it to a neurologist. Please." "I said get out." He left without another word. That night Eleanor opened the envelope. She shouldn't have, but curiosity outweighed anger. Inside were typed pages listing every episode she tried to hide. Each description was so precise it made her skin crawl. January 5th. Difficulty recalling investor names during call. January 7th. Loss of fine motor control when signing documents. January 12th. Leaning for balance leaving elevator. At the bottom, one line was underlined. Prognosis without immediate intervention. Fatal within weeks. Her hands trembled. She shoved the papers back into the envelope, as if doing so could erase what she'd read. 3 mornings later, Robert Hale received an anonymous package at their Lake Shore Drive penthouse. Inside was a USB drive labeled Urgent. Medical concern. When he plugged it into his laptop, a series of video clips appeared. Security footage from the office, time-stamped stills of Eleanor's lapses, snippets of her slurred speech from meetings. The sender's note was brief. "Your wife needs immediate neurological evaluation. She is in critical danger. Please act now." Robert's heart sank. He had noticed her confusion, the late-night headaches she brushed off. But seeing it documented with such precision left no room for denial. He called her office, but her assistant said Eleanor had canceled all meetings and wasn't answering. By noon, he was driving downtown himself. When he arrived, he found Daniel in the hallway outside Eleanor's office, mopping the floor. "Are you the one who sent this?" Robert demanded, holding up the envelope. Daniel didn't deny it. "Yes, sir." "Who are you?" "Someone who used to save lives for a living." Robert studied him. A tall black man in a janitor's uniform, calm but intense. "If any of this is true, you've just saved mine as well." Inside the office, Eleanor sat at her desk, pale and withdrawn. "Robert, what are you doing here? You need to come with me. Now." "I'm working." He walked around the desk, crouched beside her. You're not well. Look at your hands." She looked, and saw the tremor she could no longer hide. "I can't," she whispered. "If people find out." "They already have," Robert said softly. "But that doesn't matter. You need help." Eleanor's pride cracked then, a fissure of fear breaking through. For the first time in months, she didn't argue. At Northwestern Memorial Hospital, tests confirmed Daniel's suspicions. a cerebral aneurysm causing progressive neurological symptoms. The neurosurgeon ordered immediate intervention. As Eleanor was prepped for surgery, Robert turned to Daniel, who had followed quietly at the husband's request. "How did you know?" "I've seen it before," Daniel said. "Too many times." Robert extended a hand. "Thank you. You may have saved her life." Daniel shook it but said nothing. The surgery lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the surgeon approached the waiting family. "She's stable. Another day or two and she might not have been." Robert sat down hard, head in his hands. Relief flooded through him like exhaustion. Outside the ICU, Daniel stood watching through the glass as Eleanor slept, pale against the white sheets. He remembered her words, "You're a janitor, not a doctor," and felt no satisfaction, only a quiet sadness. He hadn't done this for revenge. He'd done it because the oath he'd sworn a decade ago still bound him, even if the system had stripped him of the right to wear a stethoscope. When Eleanor awoke 2 days later, her first question, voice hoarse and small, was, "Where is he?" "Who?" Robert asked. "The cleaner." Daniel entered, hesitant. She looked at him for a long time. The woman who had ruled boardrooms now looked fragile, human. "You were right," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "I was just doing my job. You shouldn't have had to." News of the incident leaked within days. A whistleblower story exploded across networks. Former nurse turned janitor saves life of CEO who ignored him. Social media devoured it. Hale Biotech's board convened an emergency meeting. Public pressure mounted. The company's shares dipped 20%. Robert stepped in as interim CEO, announcing a full review of hiring and discrimination policies. He credited Daniel publicly for his actions, calling him a man whose integrity transcends titles. Eleanor watched the press conference from her hospital bed, tears in her eyes. She knew the reckoning had only begun. When she was discharged 3 weeks later, she asked to meet Daniel privately. They sat on a bench outside the hospital, the wind cold off the lake. "I owe you more than my life," she said. He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." "I do," she insisted. "I built an empire on the idea that people are resources to be optimized. You reminded me they're human beings." Daniel smiled faintly. "Then maybe something good came out of this." "There will be," she said. "I want you back where you belong. Medicine." He hesitated. "That door's closed." "Not anymore," Eleanor said. "I'm reopening it." In the months that followed, Hale Biotech funded the Daniel Morgan Center for Clinical Ethics, a program providing scholarships to underrepresented medical students. Eleanor returned to work slowly, her demeanor transformed. She often said publicly, "I was saved not by wealth or status, but by the conscience of a man my company overlooked." Daniel, reinstated as a registered nurse after an internal review cleared his name, chose to stay with the center rather than return to corporate medicine. A year later, at a national ceremony honoring healthcare heroes, Eleanor presented him with the Humanitarian Award. Cameras flashed as she spoke. "Some debts can never be repaid, but we can honor them by changing the systems that created them." Daniel accepted the award quietly. "Saving a life doesn't make you a hero," he said into the microphone. "Seeing the humanity in the person who saves you, that's the miracle." The applause that followed was thunderous. Chicago's winter bled into a hesitant spring. On the 39th floor of Hale Biotech, the air no longer smelled of authority but of antiseptic and nervous sweat. The media storm hadn't died down. It had simply learned to hover, waiting for a new headline. Eleanor Hale returned to the building exactly 72 days after her surgery. The lobby was full of cameras. She ignored them, stepping out of the car in a dark tailored coat and a silk scarf that covered the thin surgical scar behind her ear. Every flash felt like a small electric shock. Inside, employees stopped pretending to work. They stood. Some applauded softly. Others averted their eyes. Eleanor's gait was slower, measured, part physical recovery, part humility learned under fluorescent lights and the whir of hospital machines. At the far end of the hall, Daniel waited beside the elevator, not in his janitor's uniform but in the navy blazer of the newly formed Center for Clinical Ethics. The embroidered badge over his pocket looked strange even to him. "Morning, Miss Hale," he said. "Eleanor," she corrected. "Titles seem smaller now." He smiled. "Then good morning, Eleanor." They entered the elevator together. The ride to the top floor felt different. Silent, almost reverent. When the doors opened, the reception area had changed. The portraits of past executives, white, male, confident, were gone, replaced by a wall display showing community clinics Hale Biotech, now funded across Chicago's South Side. Eleanor paused. "You did this." "The board voted for it," Daniel replied. "But yes, I suggested it. Thought it might remind us who our real shareholders are." Her laugh was soft, rueful. "You've turned my empire into a conscience." Someone had to. The transformation of Hale Biotech was far from painless. Investors demanded explanations. Advocacy groups demanded reparations. The board hired crisis consultants who tried to script Eleanor's redemption. But she refused rehearsed apologies. In her first press conference back, she spoke without notes. "I built a company on innovation," she began. "But I forgot that innovation means listening to voices beyond your own. One of those voices saved my life. His name is Daniel Morgan." The reporters leaned forward. Cameras whirred. "He was cleaning my office while I was busy cleaning my conscience of empathy," she continued. "I dismissed him because I saw a uniform, not a human being. That blindness almost killed me. I won't let this company suffer from the same disease." The video went viral again, but this time not as mockery. Within 48 hours, applications for Hale Biotech internships from minority medical students tripled. Still, not everyone celebrated. In quiet corners of the boardroom, two directors, Charles Lang and Victoria Shaw, saw opportunity in the chaos. "She's sentimental," Charles hissed after the press event. "Investors don't pay for guilt." Victoria tapped her pen. "We let her make a few speeches, then we nudge her out. Publicly for health reasons, privately for incompetence. Morgan's our wedge. If we discredit him, she collapses with him." They began their plan quietly, leaking documents suggesting Daniel had falsified his previous medical records, implying he'd forged parts of the anonymous report. When Daniel received the subpoena notice at his modest office 2 weeks later, his stomach turned. He found Eleanor that afternoon, pacing her balcony overlooking the river. "They're coming after me," he said. "I know," she replied without surprise. "Lang and Shaw. They think if they smear you, I'll fold." "What do you want me to do?" "Tell the truth," she said simply. "I'll handle the rest." But Daniel wasn't convinced the truth alone could survive corporate warfare. He'd seen what money could distort. That night he dug through old files, the ones that had cost him his nursing license years ago, the patient discrimination case at St. Matthew's Hospital. He'd kept everything. Patient charts, dosage logs, witness statements. If they wanted to call him a liar, he would remind the world why he'd been silenced in the first place. The following week, Hale Biotech's grand auditorium filled with employees for what was supposed to be a routine quarterly meeting. Halfway through, Eleanor stepped onto the stage unexpectedly. "I know rumors are circulating about the integrity of Daniel Morgan," she began. "Before we let gossip rewrite facts, I want everyone to see something. She gestured toward the projection screen. Daniel froze as the lights dimmed. On screen appeared not his own face, but the hospital board from 5 years earlier. Grainy footage from an internal hearing he hadn't known was recorded. Voices argued about optics, donor reputation, and discipline. His own calm response echoed through the hall. If equality in treatment is bad for business, maybe it's business that needs healing. When the clip ended, Eleanor faced the stunned audience. "This is the man you're questioning," she said. "He didn't falsify reports. He told uncomfortable truths, just like he did when he saved me. Hale Biotech will no longer punish integrity." The room erupted in applause. Lang and Shaw slipped out quietly before security approached them with termination letters already prepared. After the meeting, Daniel found Eleanor in her office, exhausted but smiling. "You recorded that hearing?" he asked. "No," she said. "Dr. Bennett did. She sent it to me after your license was restored. She said I might need it one day." He exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders. "I guess she was right." Eleanor looked out the window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. "You once told me saving lives isn't about who deserves it. I didn't understand then. I do now." She turned to him. "We're starting a community research wing next quarter. I want you to lead it." Daniel blinked. "That's not exactly my field anymore." "It's exactly your field," she insisted. "Observation, ethics, human understanding. That's medicine in its purest form." He hesitated only a moment before nodding. "All right, but we do it my way. Accessible, transparent, and real." "Agreed," she said. Over the next months, the Morgan Hale Initiative took shape. Mobile clinics, ethics workshops, mentorships linking janitorial staff to medical training programs. The media called it the quiet revolution. But peace never comes without echoes. One April evening, Daniel received a letter. Anonymous, typed, and signed. "You think you've redeemed her, but some debts can't be paid with charity." Attached was a photograph of Eleanor leaving the hospital, circled in red ink. Daniel's chest tightened. He called her immediately. "You need security." "I have it," she said. "Old ghosts. Let them rattle their chains." Still, the message unsettled him. Not because of the threat, but because it reminded him how fragile redemption really was. Summer brought warmth and a fragile kind of peace. Hale Biotech stock had not only recovered but surpassed pre-scandal levels. Journalists framed it as a miracle of moral capitalism. Daniel disliked the phrase. Morality shouldn't need profit to validate it. One evening, he visited the Southside clinic funded by the initiative. The waiting room was full: grandmothers, children, teenagers getting sports physicals. A mural covered the back wall. Eleanor's silhouette holding a stethoscope out to a janitor, whose reflection formed a heartbeat line across the city skyline. A nurse he trained approached. "Mr. Morgan, there's a reporter here to see you." He sighed. "Tell them no interviews." She said it's personal. He turned and froze. It was Victoria Shaw. She looked different. No longer polished, hair tied back, eyes tired. "What do you want?" he asked cautiously. "To apologize," she said, "and to warn you. There are still people inside the company who think Eleanor's redemption is a liability. They're waiting for you to make one mistake." Daniel folded his arms. "Then they'll be waiting a long time." "I hope so," she murmured, handing him a flash drive. Evidence of their next move. Keep her safe. Before he could reply, she was gone. That night, Daniel reviewed the files. They detailed plans by a private equity group to stage a takeover using Eleanor's medical history as leverage, claiming she was unfit to lead. The meeting was set for the next morning. At dawn, he drove to Eleanor's penthouse. She was already awake, reading reports. "They're coming for you again," he said, dropping the flash drive on her desk. She scanned the contents, jaw tightening. "Then let's give them a meeting they won't forget." By noon, the boardroom was full. Investors, attorneys, media representatives, all ready for spectacle. Eleanor began calmly. "Before we proceed, there's something I need to disclose." She connected her tablet to the screen, revealing MRI scans. "This is my brain. The aneurysm that nearly killed me left minor scar tissue. It affects nothing but my perspective." She looked each investor in the eye. "If you intend to remove me because I survived, be prepared to explain to every shareholder why recovery disqualifies leadership." Then she nodded toward Daniel. "Mr. Morgan will present our quarterly humanitarian returns." He stepped forward, data shimmering behind him, graphs showing community investment returns, clinic impact, workforce retention. "We proved that compassion isn't a liability," he concluded. "It's the most efficient business model we've ever had." The room fell silent. Slowly, one by one, investors began to clap. The coup evaporated. Afterward, Eleanor joined Daniel by the window overlooking the river again. "You've become quite the public speaker," she teased. "Learned from the best," he said. For a long time they stood in silence, watching the city move. Two people reshaped by survival, linked by something stronger than gratitude. Finally she said, "You once told me revenge isn't destroying someone. It's proving they can't destroy you. I think we've both done that." He smiled. "Maybe, but I'd call it healing." The storm outside mirrored the chaos brewing inside the Whitmore estate. Thunder cracked against the sprawling windows as if nature itself was protesting the deception and cruelty that had festered within those walls for years. Evelyn Whitmore stood before a mirror in her private suite, her reflection pale and drawn. The faint tremor in her left hand was worse that morning. She'd barely slept. Her thoughts spun around the upcoming family meeting, which, unbeknownst to her, wasn't about succession planning. It was an intervention. Downstairs, her husband Thomas adjusted his tie with trembling fingers, feigning composure before the arriving guests. He had called this meeting under the pretense of discussing legacy investments, but what awaited him was a reckoning orchestrated by those he'd dismissed as powerless. Malik Carter arrived an hour early, as he always did. Dressed in his usual pressed navy coveralls, he moved quietly through the marble foyer, his eyes scanning for signs of Evelyn's condition. He'd heard from Dr. Sylvia Monroe that the situation had worsened rapidly. Memory lapses, confusion, fainting spells. Time was running out. Sylvia herself was already in the library, reviewing Evelyn's anonymous medical dossier, the same file Malik had compiled with meticulous precision. She had cross-referenced every symptom, every timestamp, and her conclusion was chillingly clear. A brain aneurysm on the verge of rupture. Evelyn's arrogance had kept her alive far longer than reason, but it was also what could kill her. When the first of the executives arrived, Larson, the CFO, followed by Miranda Cho, head of operations, they exchanged polite greetings but carried an unspoken tension. Rumors had already begun to circulate through Whitmore Industries' upper ranks. Evelyn's behavior over the past few weeks had been erratic, her judgment questionable. By the time everyone was seated in the grand dining hall, Evelyn descended the staircase, her presence commanding as ever despite the faint sheen of sweat on her forehead. "Good afternoon, everyone," she said with brittle poise. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice. I want to discuss the company's future." Thomas rose, his voice calm but firm. "Evelyn, before we begin, there's something we need to address." She frowned. "This isn't the time for domestic matters." "I think it is," he said quietly. Because it's not domestic. It's medical. The silence was immediate, suffocating. What are you talking about? She asked, her tone sharp as glass. Dr. Monroe stepped forward, her medical badge catching the light. Mrs. Whitmore, I'm Dr. Sylvia Monroe. I've been made aware of certain symptoms you've been experiencing. Tremors, confusion, speech disturbances. These are serious neurological red flags. Evelyn's jaw clenched. And who exactly gave you permission to meddle in my health? I did, Thomas said softly. Because I love you. And because pretending you're fine isn't bravery. It's suicide. Her eyes darted between them, fury and fear warring behind her expression. This is absurd. I'm not sick. I'm tired, that's all. But as she reached for her water glass, her hand trembled so violently that it tipped over, sending water cascading across the polished table. A collective gasp rippled through the room.
Miranda cho stút. Alam.
Evelyn, maybe you should sit down. I am perfectly... Evelyn began, but her words dissolved into garbled syllables. Her right side slackened, the color draining from her face. The room erupted in chaos. Dr. Monroe rushed forward. She's having a stroke. Call an ambulance. Thomas's voice shook as he fumbled with his phone. 911 Whitmore Estate. My wife, she can't move. As paramedics were dispatched, Malik emerged from the hallway where he had been silently observing. His calm under pressure startled everyone. He knelt beside Evelyn, gently stabilizing her head and checking her airway. Her pulse is thready, he said to Dr. Monroe. We need to keep her flat. Don't let her aspirate. The executives froze, watching as the janitor they'd ignored took control like a seasoned professional. Malik's voice was steady, his movements efficient, clinical. Thomas looked at him, disbelief etched into his features. How do you know what to do? I told you before, Malik said quietly, never looking up. I used to be a nurse. Evelyn was rushed to St. Catherine's Hospital, lights flashing through the rain. The drive took 12 minutes. 12 minutes in which Thomas replayed every argument, every dismissal, every cruel word he'd spoken to Malik. At the hospital, the CT scan confirmed the worst. A large aneurysm pressing against her temporal lobe. It was near rupture. Emergency surgery was her only chance. Dr. Monroe found Thomas in the waiting room, his hands clasped together, knuckles white. She's being prepped for surgery now. If we'd waited even a few more hours, she would have died. Thomas finished, his voice hollow. Malik stood nearby, drenched from the rain but calm as ever. She's strong, he said quietly. And she's lucky. Most people don't get a second chance. Thomas turned to him, eyes red. You tried to warn me. You tried to warn her. And we treated you like dirt. Malik shrugged. You did what people like you always do. You looked at the uniform, not the person. There was no anger in his tone, just truth. And that truth cut deeper than rage ever could. When Evelyn woke after surgery, she was weak, her head wrapped in bandages, the monitors beside her beeping steadily. The world around her felt muted, fragile. The first face she saw wasn't Thomas's. It was Malik's. He sat quietly at her bedside, reading from a small, worn notebook. Her voice was hoarse. Why are you here? Because you almost died, he said simply. And because you need someone who'll tell you the truth. Her eyes filled with tears, not from pain, but from something heavier. You saved me. Malik closed the notebook. I tried to save you weeks ago. You didn't want to listen. She managed a weak, ironic smile. Arrogance is a hell of a disease. Worse than any I've treated, he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Silence settled between them, peaceful, restorative. For the first time, Evelyn Whitmore saw Malik Carter not as the janitor she'd belittled, but as the man who had quietly carried the integrity her world had forgotten. The media storm came next. Within days, leaked internal emails revealed that Malik had reported Evelyn's symptoms weeks prior, his warnings dismissed by the board. Screenshots of executives mocking his medical fantasies went viral. The headlines blazed across every major outlet. Janitor saves CEO's life after company ignored his warnings. From nurse to custodian, the man who exposed corporate arrogance. Whitmore Industries faces reckoning over discrimination scandal. The fallout was seismic. The board convened an emergency meeting. Miranda Cho and Larson were forced to resign. Public trust plummeted, investors panicked, and the company's stock lost nearly £400 million in value overnight. Thomas offered Malik a promotion, an apology, and a settlement worth millions. Malik refused all of it. "I don't want money," he said. "I want reform. Hire people based on competence, not on the color of their skin or the titles they carry. Do that, and maybe what happened here will mean something." In the months that followed, Evelyn recovered slowly. Her speech returned, her coordination improved, but something deeper within her had changed. A humility she'd never known before. She resigned from Whitmore Industries and established the Malik Carter Foundation for Medical Integrity, dedicated to training and certifying underrepresented nurses across the UK. When Malik stood beside her at the foundation's launch, he wore his same navy coveralls. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and Evelyn spoke with uncharacteristic emotion. "This man," she said, her voice breaking, "taught me that greatness doesn't come from power or wealth. It comes from humanity. I was blind, but he made me see." The applause was thunderous. Malik nodded politely, his smile small but genuine. After the ceremony, he walked outside into the London drizzle, breathing in the cool air. His phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Monroe. "You did it. You changed everything." He stared at the city skyline and thought of all the unseen people who kept it alive. The cleaners, the nurses, the caretakers, the invisible ones who made the world function while others claimed the glory. Sometimes, he thought, the most powerful revolutions begin quietly, with a mop, a notebook, and the courage to keep telling the truth, even when no one wants to hear it. London had finally shaken off the grayness of winter. Along the Thames, the spring sunlight shimmered against the water, soft and golden, as if the city itself wanted to start over. 6 months had passed since the scandal that changed everything. 6 months since the janitor everyone ignored had rewritten the story of integrity. Malik Carter still rose at dawn, the rhythm of his life steady as ever. But now, when he walked through the glass doors of Whitmore House, people didn't look through him. They greeted him by name. The security guards nodded respectfully. The executives in tailored suits stopped to shake his hand. Even the cleaners who once kept their heads down now walked a little taller. Inside, the walls that once bore cold corporate slogans had been replaced with something different. Photographs of community nurses, volunteers, and patients helped through the Malik Carter Foundation. The foundation's emblem, a pair of intertwined hands beneath a rising sun, was etched into the lobby floor where visitors couldn't miss it. Every corner of the building whispered a quiet transformation. Whitmore Industries, once synonymous with privilege and arrogance, had become the face of reform. Scholarships for disadvantaged students, mandatory diversity training, partnership programs with community hospitals. Evelyn Whitmore, now chair of the foundation's board, refused to let the lessons fade into corporate slogans. And yet, amid all the change, Malik had remained the same. He still wore his navy coveralls when he came to work. He still carried his small, worn notebook, But those who knew him understood that his presence now carried more weight than any title could give. That morning, Evelyn waited for him in her new office, a far humbler space than the penthouse suite she once commanded. Her recovery had been slow but steady. The faint scar along her hairline was a reminder of both her mortality and her rebirth. She still struggled with partial weakness in her left hand, but her mind was clearer than it had been in years. When Malik entered, she smiled. "You're early. Again." He shrugged lightly. "Old habits. Besides, someone has to make sure your coffee isn't poisoning you." Evelyn laughed, the sound soft and genuine. "I switched to tea. Less drama." "Progress," he said, taking a seat across from her. There was an ease between them now, an understanding forged through fire. "I wanted to talk to you about next week," she began, folding her hands. "The hospital wing opens on Thursday. They're naming it after you." Malik shook his head. "They shouldn't. You earned it. I didn't do it for that." "I know," she said gently. "That's exactly why it should carry your name." He was quiet for a moment, gazing out at the London skyline. "Evelyn, I don't want the world to remember a janitor who embarrassed a corporation. I want them to remember what comes after. The change. The people who finally get a chance because of it." Evelyn nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure that's what they see." Across town, at St. Catherine's Hospital, preparations were underway for the opening of the Malik Carter Center for Preventive Medicine. A sleek, modern wing funded by Whitmore Industries and private donors. But Malik had insisted on one thing. The center would never turn away a patient for lack of money. Dr. Sylvia Monroe stood beside a plaque being polished by volunteers. She smiled as she read the inscription aloud. "To the unseen hands that save lives, even when no one is watching." She thought back to the day she met Malik, an exhausted man in a faded uniform holding a notebook full of hope. She had seen a kind of faith in him that medicine rarely taught anymore. Faith in humanity's capacity to learn, even from its worst moments. Now she saw that faith bearing fruit. The opening ceremony drew national attention. Reporters gathered along the hospital steps, cameras flashing as dignitaries arrived. But Malik, as usual, kept to the edges. He helped direct volunteers, adjusted banners, and checked that every seat had bottled water. It wasn't until Evelyn appeared, walking slowly with the aid of a cane, that he allowed himself to take his place beside her on stage. When the crowd quieted, Evelyn approached the podium. Her voice, once icy with authority, was now warm with humility. "6 months ago," she began, "I nearly lost my life because I believed power made me invincible. But someone I looked down on saw what I refused to see. He saved my life, not just with his knowledge, but with his compassion." She turned to Malik. "He taught me that leadership isn't about control. It's about listening to those we ignore, about seeing the value in every human being who keeps the world running." Applause swelled through the courtyard. Evelyn waited for it to fade before continuing. "Today, we open this center not as a monument to my recovery, but as a promise to every nurse, every cleaner, every invisible worker who has ever been dismissed. We see you now, and we will never look away again." When she stepped aside, Malik hesitated before taking the microphone. Public speaking was never his strength, but he felt the weight of the moment. "I was a nurse once," he began quietly. "Then life took that away. I thought my purpose was gone. But I learned something working these halls with a mop in my hand. You can't take purpose from someone who still chooses to care." He paused, scanning the faces, doctors, executives, janitors, students. "People think heroism looks like grand gestures," he said. "But most of the time it's invisible. It's the cleaner who stays late to make sure a patient's room smells like hope. It's the nurse who listens when everyone else is rushing out the door. It's the doctor who apologizes when they get it wrong and tries again. The crowd was silent now, caught in the honesty of his words. I didn't save Evelyn because I wanted recognition, Malik said. I saved her because I could, because that's what we're supposed to do for one another. And if this place teaches just one person that lesson, then it's worth everything. He stepped back from the podium. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed him for interviews. Malik politely declined every request. Instead, he joined the nurses on a tour of the new facility, admiring the diagnostic labs, the free community clinic, the pediatric unit filled with colorful murals painted by volunteers. A young man approached him in the hallway, holding a notebook similar to Malik's. Mr. Carter? The man said nervously. I wanted to thank you. I saw your story online. I was going to drop out of nursing school. Thought it wasn't worth it anymore. Then I read about you. Now I'm finishing my degree. Malik smiled, clapping a hand on his shoulder. Then you'll already be better than most. Don't ever stop noticing people. That's where real medicine starts. The young man nodded, eyes shining. As Malik walked away, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. A quiet certainty that all the pain, the loss, the humiliation, had led somewhere good. Later that evening, Evelyn found him standing by the river behind the hospital, watching the sunset smear gold across the water. Do you ever regret it? She asked, coming to stand beside him. Regret what? Everything that happened. Losing your license. The years you spent cleaning floors. He considered that for a long moment. I used to, he admitted. But if I hadn't lost all that, I never would have seen what people like me go through every day. I never would have understood what justice really looks like. And I never would have met you. She smiled faintly. You still believe people can change? I've seen it. The wind lifted her hair as they stood in silence, the city humming softly around them. Malik, she said at last, you could run this foundation, you know. The board would vote you in tomorrow. He shook his head. No. It needs you. People listen to you now, not because of fear, but because of respect. Keep using that voice. I'll stay where I belong. Where's that? Among the people who don't think they matter. They're the ones who need reminding. Evelyn nodded slowly, understanding. Then at least promise me one thing. What's that? Don't ever think you're invisible again. He smiled. Deal. As weeks turned into months, the ripple effect of their story spread beyond London. Hospitals across the country began reviewing policies on discrimination and workplace hierarchy. Nursing schools introduced ethics modules inspired by Malik's story. Media outlets moved on to newer headlines, but the quiet revolution he sparked continued to grow. On the anniversary of the foundation's opening, Malik visited the plaque once more. Someone had left fresh lilies at its base. Beside them lay a handwritten note in looping cursive. Because of you, I listened when my patient couldn't speak. And it saved her life. He folded the note carefully, slipped it into his pocket, and whispered a simple thank you to the air. That evening, he returned home to his modest flat. The walls were lined with photographs, not of accolades or ceremonies, but of people. Patients smiling, colleagues laughing, Dr. Monroe with her ever-present coffee cup, Evelyn standing proudly with children at the clinic. Malik sat at his desk and opened his old notebook. On the final page, he wrote one line, "Purpose never leaves us. We just have to keep showing up for it." Then he closed the book, turned off the light, and let the city's quiet hum lull him into peace. For the first time in a long time, Malik Carter felt whole. And somewhere in the heart of London, a neon sign flickered to life above the hospital doors. casting soft light across the street. 10 years later, London moved to a different rhythm. Glass towers had grown taller along the Thames. Electric buses glided noiselessly through the streets, and the skyline gleamed brighter than ever. But tucked between those towers stood a building that had quietly become the city's heartbeat, the Malek Carter Center. Inside its walls, the sounds were the same every morning: soft laughter, the shuffle of nurses' shoes, the steady beep of monitors, and the hum of lives being rebuilt. The lobby carried an inscription in brass above the entrance. "We are remembered not by what we keep, but by what we give." Visitors rarely passed it without pausing. Dr. Amara Fielding, the center's new medical director, was only 29, one of the youngest in the country. Every day she touched the brass letters on that plaque before starting rounds. She'd grown up in Brixton, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts cleaning offices. When she was 17, her mother had collapsed from exhaustion. A stranger, the hospital janitor, had noticed before anyone else, called for help, and saved her life. That story had traveled through her family like gospel. Now, years later, Amara found herself leading the very institution named after that same man. On her desk sat a framed photograph. Malek Carter shaking hands with her graduating class, smiling his quiet smile. On a mild afternoon in early May, a familiar figure walked through the center's doors. The staff recognized him immediately, though time had softened his features and silvered his hair. Malek Carter moved a little slower now, but his eyes still carried that calm focus people remembered. He paused by the plaque, traced the engraved letters with his fingertips, and whispered something only he could hear. Dr. Fielding hurried out to meet him. "Mr. Carter, we weren't expecting you." He smiled. "Good. Surprises keep people honest." They laughed. "Come," she said. "There's someone you should see." Out back, the center opened onto a small courtyard filled with blooming lavender and white roses. A bronze statue stood at its heart, two hands lifting a heart-shaped globe. Beneath it, a plaque read, "In memory of Evelyn Whitmore, 1962 to 2032. She learned. She changed. She gave back." Evelyn had passed away the previous year, peacefully, surrounded by the nurses and doctors she had helped train. Her final project had been this garden, a place of rest for staff and patients alike. Malek knelt beside the plaque, laying down a single lily. "She kept her promise," he said quietly. Dr. Fielding nodded. "She never let a week pass without visiting, even when her health started failing." He looked around at the thriving space, the young interns chatting by the fountain, the elderly couple holding hands on a bench. "She would have liked this," he said. "Life, still moving." Inside, a group of students had gathered in the auditorium for orientation. Dr. Fielding led Malek to the stage. The crowd fell silent when they recognized him. Even the air seemed to pause. He looked out over them, faces full of energy and uncertainty, and began without notes. "I don't have speeches anymore," he said. "Just stories. Because stories are how truth travels when people stop listening to facts." He told them about a woman who thought she was untouchable, about a hospital janitor who refused to stop caring, and about what happened when those two lives collided. He spoke of humility, of listening, of second chances. When he finished, no one moved. Then a young nurse stood and asked, "Mr. Carter, after everything you went through, what kept you from giving up on people?" Malek smiled, the same small, knowing smile. "Because someone has to go first," he said. "Someone has to believe kindness still works before the world remembers it does." Applause filled the hall, not thunderous, but warm and enduring, like a heartbeat. That evening, Malek sat alone in the garden, his notebook open on his knee. The pages were yellowed, the handwriting slower now. He wrote one final line. Legacy isn't what remains after we're gone. It's what grows because we stayed long enough to plant it. He closed the notebook, placed it gently beneath the statue's base, and rose. As he walked toward the gates, children's laughter drifted from the pediatric wing. The city skyline shimmered beyond the courtyard, each window catching the fading sunlight. He paused once more, turned back, and smiled. Later that night, the janitorial crew began their rounds. A young cleaner, new to the job, found the notebook under the statue. Curious, she flipped it open and began to read. By the time she reached the last line, tears blurred her vision. She closed it reverently and tucked it inside her cart. Tomorrow, she decided, she'd start her nursing classes. Somewhere far away, Malik slept peacefully, unaware that the legacy he had built was already taking root again. In the quiet hearts of people the world still overlooked. And above the garden, the sign on the glass doors glowed softly in the dark. The Malik Carter Center, where every life matters. The light never went out.